Welcome. I'm your host, Rakim Sabri, and this is another episode of Financially Irresponsible. If you don't remember, I am a coach, columnist, and author, and we're here to discuss all things money, all things financial trauma, the connection between money and mental health. And I want to start off this episode with student loans. So student loans have resumed, and there's this idea around education being the great equalizer. And so that's the question that I really want to ponder today, as well as share some stories about my own educational pursuits and what it is that I've been seeing out in the world with some of my peers and people coming up pursuing that higher education. So we will rewind all the way to the year 2008. That is the year I graduated high school and I started college. So my college journey was not a linear one. While I was in high school, I did not have necessarily the guidance to kind of navigate higher education. So SATs, they told us we had to take them. The PSAT, they told us we had to take them. I actually did well on both, but I didn't apply to a lot of the different schools that I should have applied. I didn't apply early enough. And so when I did end up applying, I didn't hear back from a lot of people or a lot of the schools. There were a few that I did hear back from, and so I went on some college visits to narrow it down. And during one of the college visits, which was in New Jersey, I grew up in New York, it was in New Jersey, the individual that took me to the college visit, we're walking around doing a tour, we're talking about the tuition, how much it's gonna cost to be there, room and board because it was far away from my home. The individual shared with me that everybody takes out student loans, so don't worry about the cost. Everybody takes out student loans. You'll just have to pay that back over time, but you have time to pay that back. And even though I was really concerned about the amount ahead of me at 17 or 18, however old I was, this individual kind of gave me the reassurance that once I graduated and I got into a good paying job, I'd be able to pay it all off. And there's this kind of like stigma that exists, certainly in the community that I grew up in, around going to community colleges and basically getting, half of your degree for free or close to free with a lot less of an expense than going off to, a traditional four-year school. And so I made it a point to go to this four-year school. It wasn't my first choice, so I said, I'm just gonna do a year, maybe two, transfer out, and see, who'll take me afterwards. And so, I get to the financial aid office, they're giving us all this paperwork, we're filling out the FAFSA, I get the student loan, all the grants, whatever, fill it out. I remember sitting down in the library, reading through the pages and pages and pages of electronic disclosures around what repayment looks like, what the terms are. There was two different kinds of loans. It was all just a lot of confusing stuff. And I had to sit there and go through what was called an entrance interview in order to be qualified for these loans. And so eventually I ended up taking out the loans, going to school, and the loans plus the grants that I had for the tuition, room and board, covered everything but books. So I had a place to stay, I had a meal plan, my school was covered. And once the student loan refund came, I think the refund check was like just over $200. Everybody's super excited about this time. Everybody's going to the bursar's office to get their check. I remember I had to use the check to buy some school supplies that I didn't have and pay for food. And so it was a super exciting time. At that age, $200 seemed like a lot of money. I wasn't working. And I was trying to focus on making sure that I got good grades. And for the most part, I did. I navigated my first year of school without books for the most part, and I was managing probably around a C average in most of my classes. Some classes I got B's, and certainly other classes I got D's. But I just remember the extreme amount of stress and pressure to perform in an environment where I didn't feel like I was adequately supported financially. And so now fast forward to this year, 2023, I still have some student loan balances And there are a lot of people who are worried coming out of this, post-pandemic student loan repayment moratorium, who have to now include those payments as a part of their budgeting or their monthly expenses. And so I think it makes a lot of people scratch their head and kind of think back, was it worth it? Was going to school worth it? Or rather, not was going to school worth it, but was taking out the loans worth it? And if there was another way articulated, or if I didn't have that conversation with that individual who told me that everybody takes out student loans, and that maybe some conversations were had around better ways forward, like going to the community college initially and then transferring out into a 4-year school, or maybe looking at skills and trades that were going to be high income skills that you could use in the workplace immediately until you figured out what it is that you ultimately wanted to do. How would that have shaped not only my life, but the lives of many people who would just kind of feel like they were scammed? And that's the interesting question I think that a lot of people are experiencing right now. Is the student loan and higher education process a scam? Is higher education the great equalizer? Because certainly I know personally people who do not have degrees, who make, and depending on the field that they're in, who make just about as much as or more than in yearly income what some people who have college degrees, either on a bachelor's level or on a master's degree level, make more than those individuals. And those individuals who do not have the degrees, who do not have the debt, can navigate their financial lives a lot easier or with less stress because they're not worrying about those particular student loan debts. Or maybe they have different debt like housing debt or car debt or credit card debt, but it's in a more they have a more responsible process around paying those things off. And so that's the question that I want to explore. Does higher education, does college debt, is that the great equalizer? And from what I've seen and from what I'm seeing in today's world, I don't think so. It's not the great equalizer. Like I said, there are people out there who did not go to college, who did not graduate with a 4-year degree, who did not go beyond the 4-year degree, who are making a ton of money compared to people who did and who have all of this debt that they have to sit and pay back. I think of another story while I was in college, and I'll probably never forget this, as we talk about kind of like the trauma of money and the way that financial trauma shows up in the decisions that we make around moving forward within a particular area. And I remember, I'll never forget, like I said, I didn't have any money for books and barely had enough money for food. I had an English class for my freshman year, and I go into the class, and this teacher has a reputation. Like, before we even see her face, we know her name. And I won't say her name, but everybody's like kind of scared about having this teacher because she's known as being a very difficult teacher. She's known as not giving people A's on their work. Like, you really had to work hard in this class. And I'm sitting in this class, I'm sitting in the back of the class, kind of embarrassed that I don't have the books to do the work, and just going through the lecture. And she's asking questions, and she's just like randomly picking on people to read out loud from the text. And I'm at the time kind of like trying to work with somebody who's sitting next to me who has the book. I'm kind of looking over at their book to work with them. And the teacher calls on me. And I remember my heart just sinking in that moment. My heart was just like, I started just freaking out. And she's asking me to read a section of the book that we were going over. And I'm like, I don't have it. And she just goes crazy. You don't have the book? What do you mean you don't have the book? That is a requirement of this class. How do you intend on passing this class without the book, et cetera, et cetera. Everybody in the class is staring at me. I'm just sitting there just like, don't know what to do, frozen in place. Teacher kicks me out of the class. She tells me I need to go to the library, I need to find the book, I need to make copies of these pages, and don't come back into the class until I do. So I go to the library, I find the book. I have to make copies of the pages, but in order to make copies, I had to spend, I think it was 10 cents a copy. So I don't have any change. I'm going around, I'm asking people, do they have change so that I can use the copy machine to make these copies? And I don't know how long I was in there. It felt like eternity, but maybe I was in there for 30 minutes. Maybe I was in there for 10 minutes. I make the appropriate copies. I go back to the class, and the teacher completely moved on to the next section of her lesson. And I didn't expect that she was going to wait for me necessarily, but I just remember feeling super defeated because she made this huge scene, told me to go to the library, told me to make these copies. I had to go beg people for change to make these copies of these pages. And then I get back and I realized that the pages are now worthless. There's nothing else that we're gonna make reference to these pages. Fortunately, I passed that class. Writing is a strength of mine, and it was a composition and lit class. But I just remember the feelings of shame and guilt and embarrassment for not having. And in not having, when I had to leave the classroom, like I was chastised. Teacher didn't ask, didn't want to understand. And then going into the library and then basically like begging people for change to make these copies, to then come back and realize that my efforts were just all pretty much in vain. I'm sure there was a lesson in there somewhere that the teacher was trying to teach me. But in that moment, I just remember feeling this immense amount of guilt and shame and embarrassment because I didn't have what I needed in that moment. And when I pull back the layers and think about how that impacted me from a financial trauma perspective, and understanding that I was basically being penalized for being poor, right? For not having, like I wasn't in a situation where I could ask my parents to buy the books for me, or where I had these resources. It wasn't an issue of negligence on my part that I didn't have the book. It was an issue of income. It was an issue of resources. And I think about how that shows up in the world every day. How many people who have a college education and who don't have a college education are penalized for what it is that they don't have financially, or what it is that they don't have from an educational perspective. We look at today's economy and how difficult it is for people to find jobs, and they're filling out these job applications, and on the job application, the role is requiring that they have X number of years of experience in a given field and a college degree. People out there who want to work, who want to make, this money to support their families, who can't do it because they did not have the ability to go out and get the education that was necessary, or they chose not to go down the path of taking out these crazy loans so that they would have, they would be burdened with this debt just so that they could go and get a job. And so going back to this question that, I want us to sit with, is the higher education the great equalizer, and what is the implication of forcing, all of these generations of people to go and take out this massive amount of debt that is a part of a financial crisis, right? People are, as in payments have just resumed, but people are now having to figure out how to fit their student loan payments into their budget among the other expenses and the increased inflation and, just the cost of living increases. How are people going to manage these student loan payments as a part of their finances? And ultimately, they're going to be in a situation like I was. They're going to be standing in the library begging people for change to make copies so that once they bring these copies back to the classroom, everything hasn't moved on without them. And so I think it's really interesting that we sit and we explore how poverty, or how, I don't even want to call it a poverty, how the lack of financial resources shows up in people, in the world, in society, and how those people are penalized, and what those people are left standing with, and how those people are blamed for things that are outside of their control. And with full intentions of doing the work, working hard, being disciplined, being dedicated, changing their lives, changing the lives of the people around them, being able to support the people around them, how those people are penalized and really ostracized in society because of what it is that they don't have. And I went on, I think about my experience moving on through higher education. That process dragged out for me. It wasn't, like I said, it wasn't a linear path. I didn't stay at that school. I left that school after the first year. And then I went part-time to school. And then I went to a community college at school. Then I moved across country and didn't go to school for a little while. And then I ended up back in school. And I ended up back at a community college. And so ultimately, when I did end up having a degree, what I remember feeling was this disenchantment with the process. I remember feeling that I wanted to stop. Like, I did not want to do this anymore. I did not want to continue to commit energy towards going higher, going further. And when I think about a younger version of myself who wanted to be a doctor, right? Who wanted to have this doctorate degree, or in my case, it was an MD. I wanted to become a psychiatrist. And how I allowed those early experiences financially with education and the interruptions of this, what was articulated as a linear path, stop me or slow me down, developing this kind of distaste or this disdain for the process. And where that leaves me today, it's taken me a very long time to want to even consider re-engaging with higher education, and even in the process of considering it, because very much is a part of my plan. Even in the process of reconsidering it, thinking about the financial implications of taking out additional debt or tuition reimbursement or just paying out of pocket to get to a higher level. And what does that equate to? Like, when we look at the workplace, we look at corporate America, and we look at the pressure for people to get more so that they could climb higher, so they could get more so that they could climb higher. Excuse me. And just kind of like sucking all the joy out of the experience of learning, and taking all the joy out of the experience of doing this thing because it was a part of your dream, versus doing this thing because it is necessary for upward social mobility. And there's so many other avenues that come with that, particularly for people of color who have to navigate things like a wage gap in corporate settings, or a wealth gap in terms of, the assets that their family owns. This idea of financial freedom that people are chasing, tied into education, tied into higher income, higher salaries, the ability to provide for and care for their family. This dream that was sold to many of us at a high school level, even at a college level, even still to this day, that hasn't been realized because so many people are burdened with this debt, especially within certain disciplines that don't turn out high income salaries. So definitely an interesting topic to explore. And I want to remind everybody who is listening, who might be experiencing a little bit of anxiety, a little bit of panic, a little bit of guilt around their finances as the student loan payments start to commence. Budgeting and planning is essential. Take a deep breath. Deal with the shame and the guilt separately from the mechanics of your finances. The mechanics being like taking into account what is coming in, taking into account what is going out. How do you budget for this? What programs can you call your student loan providers and ask for an income-based repayment plan? Can you call your student loan providers and ask for a deferment? If you're not in a position where you are working or where you have an income, can you call your student loan provider and ask for forbearance so that you're not required to pay right now? Like, you get a little bit of breathing room. Take the emotion out of it and look at this from a tactical perspective. And then when you finally do deal with the emotions of it, separate from the tactical part of your process, understand that your reasoning behind making the choice to take out these student loans was more likely than not based off of a story that you were told around how this is going to impact your financial future, and that you don't have anything to be ashamed of for trying to do the best thing for yourself. But no matter what the amount is, there is a light at the end of the tunnel. And within that process of kind of digging yourself out, it's important to work with financial professionals who can help you establish a plan for making digging yourself out of that possible. So again, I know this is I think this is our first time back in a long time. I want you to go back to some of the older episodes where we talk about mindfulness, where we talk about removing guilt and shame from the financial equation, when we talk about the affirmations, and we talk about the non-physical, non-tangible aspects of money management, so that you can have a holistic financial wellness experience despite these financial burdens showing up. And just want to remind you all, financial therapists do exist. You can find those online. Financial counselors do exist. You can also find those online. And financial coaches do exist. So if you're experiencing anxiety, stress, guilt, any kind of emotional or mental distress, definitely seek out one of those financial professionals. And if you're a higher income professional who needs to incorporate the repayment of your student loans into your financial plan, definitely work with your financial planners or financial advisors to create a plan that allows for you to do that as well. So this has been another episode of Financially Irresponsible, and we'll see you next time.
The Saybrook Fish House in Canton has been serving fresh seafood, chicken, and steak entrees for 34 years, offering 3 cozy dining room settings, a newly renovated pub with craft beer, wine by the glass, specialty cocktails, and a lighter fare menu. Open for lunch and dinner 7 days a week. Reservations accepted for parties of 2 to 42, and gift certificates are also available. The Saybrook Fish House, nestled at the crossroads of Route 44, 202, and 179 in Canton.
I'm your host, Kurt Barwis. Today, I have a very special guest, Dr. Andrew Lim.
Hello, and welcome to another episode of the Veterans Corner. My name's Chuck Wooden.
Decision for ourselves for this week, if we want to be made well.
Hi, welcome to the crack of dawn. It's Dawn Lombardi. I'm starting the painting. It's going to be the cliffs with some water. Love it.
He took me on the sets of Lost in Space, Batman.
Everybody has a story. What's yours? Until next time.